All right, let's just jump right in. Have you ever gotten a job offer and seen stuff like RSU, ISO, NSO, and just your eyes glaze over? It feels like you're trying to decode some secret message, right? Well, today we're going to demystify that whole alphabet soup of stock compensation. So, your offer letter mentions stock, and that's awesome. It's super exciting, especially if you're joining a startup or a company that's really taking off. But here's the thing. Do you really know what you're getting? Because owning stock options is not the same thing as having cold, hard shares in your hand. So let's break down exactly what this means for you. Okay, first things first. Why do companies even bother with all this? Why not just give you more cash? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. They want to give you a piece of the pie. It's all about giving you, the employees, some real skin in the game. The idea is to align everybody's goals. When the company wins, you win. It's as simple as that.
All right, let's start with the most straightforward one of the bunch, restricted stock units, or RSUs. If you've ever worked for a big, publicly traded tech company, you've probably seen these. Honestly, think of them as the simplest version of stock comp. It's basically a promise to give you shares later. And here's the key thing to wrap your head around. When you get an RSU grant, you don't actually have stock yet. Not really. It's more like a voucher, a placeholder. It's a promise that says, hey, this unit will turn into a real share of stock after you've met a certain condition. And 99% of the time, that condition is just sticking around for a while, what we call the vesting period. The whole life cycle for an RSU is super simple, really. It's just 3 steps. 1, you get the grant. That's the company saying, here's your promise. 2, they vest. This is the magic moment when that promise turns into actual stock that you own. And 3, yep, you guessed it, taxes. The second they vest, they're taxed. Now, this is the part you really need to pay attention to. The day your RSUs vest, the total value of those shares is treated as income, just like your salary. It's basically like getting a bonus. So what usually happens is your company will automatically sell some of those shares to cover the taxes. You don't even have to do anything. It just happens. But it's an automatic tax event for sure.
Okay, let's switch gears completely. We're moving from RSUs to the world of stock options, and this is a huge mental shift. With RSUs, you are given stock. It's a gift. With options, you are given the option, the right to buy stock at a price that's already been set.
So, just to be super clear, an option doesn't mean you own any shares. Not yet. What you own is an opportunity. You get to buy a certain number of shares at a fixed price, we call that the strike price, sometime in the future. The whole game is hoping the actual market price of the stock goes way, way up so you can buy low and, well, you know the rest. This little SpongeBob example is perfect, right? He gets the option to buy Krusty Krab stock for $10. A year later, it's worth $20. But does he have to pay $20? Nope. He gets to use his option and buy it for that original $10 price he locked in. That's the power of the strike price. That $10 difference, that's his profit. So let's put it side by side. RSUs are passive. When they vest, boom, the shares and the value are just delivered to you. Options are active. You have to make a choice. You have to decide to exercise your right to buy, and you have to cough up the cash for that strike price to actually get your hands on the shares. Okay, so you get what an option is. Awesome. But of course, it's not that simple. There are 2 main flavors of options, NSOs and ISOs. And you really, really need to know which one you have, because how they're taxed is totally different. So think of NSOs, that's non-qualified stock options, as kind of the workhorse. They're flexible, they're common, and they can be given to pretty much anyone, employees, contractors, you name it. But ISOs, incentive stock options, they're special. They have some pretty sweet potential tax advantages, and because of that, they can only be given to employees. With NSOs, the tax trigger is super clear. It happens the second you exercise your option, the moment you buy the shares. That difference between the market price and your lower strike price, that's called the bargain element or a paper gain. And boom, it's taxed as regular income that year, even if you haven't sold a single share. And this is why ISOs are so attractive. When you exercise an ISO, there's no regular income tax. Nothing. The tax man waits until you actually sell the shares, which is a huge deal. But there's always a but, right? You have to be aware of something called the alternative minimum tax, or AMT. It's a whole separate tax system, and exercising a bunch of ISOs can sometimes trigger it. So it's definitely something to watch out for. So to get the absolute best tax treatment on your ISOs, We're talking those sweet, lower long-term capital gains rates. You have to play by the rules. It's called the golden rule for a reason. You gotta satisfy two timelines at once. Think of it like starting two different stopwatches. The first one starts on your grant date. That's a 2-year clock. The second one starts the day you exercise. That's a 1-year clock. You can't sell until both of those clocks have finished. Okay, so looking at this table, the trade-off becomes pretty clear, right? ISOs give you a shot at much lower taxes, but you have to jump through hoops. You've got those holding periods, which means you're taking on more risk by holding the stock longer. NSOs are way more straightforward. Fewer rules, more flexible. But you're almost certainly going to pay a bigger tax bill, and you're going to pay it sooner. Phew, okay, that was a lot. So let's boil this all down. Forget all the jargon for a second. What are the key moments? What are the trigger points you absolutely have to be ready for? If you have RSUs, it's all about one day. The day they vest. That's it. That's when the shares become yours, and that's when the tax bill gets created automatically. You've got to be ready for it. If you have NSOs, the key moment is when you exercise. You're in the driver's seat here. You decide when to pull the trigger. But the moment you do, you're creating that tax event. So you better have a plan for where the money for the purchase and the taxes is going to come from. And finally, with ISOs, it's a double whammy. You have two key moments. What happens when you exercise and what happens when you sell? You've got to think about both. You need a plan for exercising, keeping an eye on that AMT, and then you need the patience to wait out those holding periods before you sell. It's a long game. All right, so let's wrap this up. What are the big takeaways? For RSUs, the tax hits when they vest. For options, the tax hits when you exercise. And for ISOs, you've got those special rules for a reason, to save on taxes, but you got to be patient. And remember, none of this is guaranteed money. Its value goes up and down. But just understanding these key differences, that puts you in control. Look, at the end of the day, your equity isn't a lottery ticket. It's a strategic part of your compensation, and you need a plan for it. Now that you know the difference between vesting, exercising, and selling, now that you know the rules of the game, you're in a much better position. So the real question is, what's your next move?